Hi, my name is Taiti. I wanted to tell you about how to write a learning diary. If you're taking part in my course in business ethics and corporate social responsibility, this will be your most important piece of coursework, which comes in addition to 70% attendance in class and then 2 discussion forum tasks, 2 discussion forum posts. Even if you don't participate in my course but have to write a learning diary or a reflection journal for another course, you may find this information useful because there are, of course, some small differences between learning diary assignments, but a lot of the general guidelines on how to answer a question will be applicable for all of them. For the Business Ethics and Corporate Social Responsibility course, there's also a document available for you on your course page. There you have the questions that you need to answer for each week, some guidelines on writing, and also some guidelines on the use of sources and references. On this video, I'm going to first start with explaining what a learning diary or a reflection journal is and why I've chosen it as an assignment for you on this course. I will then move on to give you guidelines on how to answer a learning diary question, what constitutes a weaker answer, a better answer, perhaps a really strong answer to a learning diary question, and then I'm also going to give you a few examples of how to use sources. The use of sources in a learning diary assignment does not need to be as precise or as rigorous as in an academic essay or in a dissertation paper, but it's a good opportunity to practice the correct use of sources. In the end, I also have a little ask for you. If you're on my course, I'm asking you to include a page or a few comments on your learning diary with feedback on the course and my teaching. So please do give me some good, honest feedback on what was good, what was helpful, what supported your learning, what was interesting, but also on what was not so helpful, what was difficult to understand, what was really not at all that interesting. With your feedback and your ideas, your suggestions and your comments, I can make improvements for the course for the next intake of students. So thank you in advance for your feedback and for your comments. Now let's move on to looking at what is a learning diary. So, why have you been given a learning diary assignment rather than an exam or an essay on this course? This question is actually quite easy one to answer. I belong to the group of educators that believe in that by working on a material, reflecting on it, and trying to build some connections from what you are learning on this course to what you've learned before and what you can apply, produces a much better quality of learning than trying to memorize theories and concepts and trying to remember them by heart and then trying to repeat them in an exam situation. And of course, a good essay type of an answer in an exam is much more than just merely repeating facts and repeating information. But that also brings us to the second part of my answer, why a learning diary rather than an exam. We are studying a topic where critical thinking is particularly important. And I believe that you will be able to exercise and improve on your critical thinking skills much better through a reflective written task rather than by answering an exam question. So it's also the difference in the content of the course that makes a learning diary a particularly good assignment for you. Why not an essay then? Well, this is an introductory course and we cover quite a large number of different topics. And on an introductory course, we don't go very deep into any of these topics. And I feel that it's better for your longer term learning to have a general understanding of each of these themes rather than only work on 1 or 2 of them. But that's of course my opinion and you may disagree. And if you do, please remember to provide your views in the course feedback if you think another type of task or assignment would be more suitable as the main course assignment. I'm open for your feedback. Now let's look at a few tips for how you can best answer a question in your learning diary and what should you pay attention to. So how do you answer a question? What's essential in answering a question in learning diary is an analytical and reflective approach to the content of the lecture and the question. You of course have to answer the question, so that's the first thing, but depending on the type of question or task you've been given, whether it's an open-ending or a more specific question, You can simply just reflect on what you've learned, what you found more complex, more difficult, and the reasons why. Or you could quote a theory or a definition of a concept that was introduced in the lecture, analyze it as its usefulness, provide an example of its application, or criticize it for its lack of usefulness, limited scope of application, or incoherence. You can freely criticize or disagree with the theories or concepts, but when you do, you should provide grounds and supportive arguments to the reasons why you disagree with it. Don't just merely say, I don't agree. Please explain why. If you can provide a theory or a well-known argument that supports your view, that's great. But you don't have to. You can also use your own reasoning. What's in here is important. Like I said, your own reasoning and reflection is the most important part of this task. This is why it's also often called a reflection journal. And then I also wanted to remind you that on this course, you will work on your learning diary independently. On another course, you could have a reflection journal or learning diary that is written together as a group, but not on this course. On this course, it's individual work, so you should complete this task independently. Now, let's move on to look at what a learning diary is not. So, if a learning diary needs to be reflective, thoughtful, analytical, and critical, is there anything that a learning diary should not be like? There are a couple of things. First of all, it should not be completely free text. That means it should follow the guidelines your teacher has given. Most importantly, you need to ensure that you answer the question that you were given. So, mistake number one is writing freely about the topic, but not really answering the question. It's often a good starting point to think of how would I answer this question in one sentence, and then build your additional arguments in support or against around it. You can also provide examples. On this course, those could be examples from the news about a particularly ethical or unethical company that fits the topic of the week. So then the second thing that a learning diary is not, it's lecture notes. So your answer should not resemble lecture notes or a summary that only repeats the information that was introduced during the lectures. The notes that you take during the lecture are of course useful for you in writing this task, but you should not directly write them into your learning diary. So rather than only summarizing the content, you should keep in mind when you answer the question, so first of all, that you need to answer the question, and you also need to provide your own views. So remember, what's in here is important. In some of the questions, I've given you suggestions of sources to refer to. You don't have to refer to only these sources that I've suggested, but I've given you some sources, especially at the beginning of the course, to make it easier for you to get started with formulating an answer. So you have a theoretical starting point that you can then build your own arguments on. If you have a more open-ended question on what you learned, for example, from a case study, and what you found interesting about a topic, you may, for example, want to mention something that was particularly interesting for you, but do also give the reasons why it was interesting. Then in turn, the question was related to a specific theory. Try to avoid merely repeating what is in the lecture slides or what your teacher has shared with you during the lecture. So that was what a learning diary is not. Let's have a look in a little bit more detail about a good answer and a weaker answer next. So what are some of the examples and some of the criteria for a good answer and maybe a little bit of a weaker answer? I've already given you some general guidelines on how to answer a question, but I wanted to give you just 2 more tips if you wanted to write a really good learning diary. So a good answer would highlight some theories, concepts, or other information that you learned during the course. It can also draw from your general knowledge, things that can be considered as widely accepted facts. We can of course debate what those are, but follow your own thinking, follow your own gut feeling about what could constitute as widely accepted facts. It would also bring out your own observations and experiences related to the topic, your reactions, and perhaps your feelings. A good answer would balance these elements. It would not only present the theories and concepts, but it would also present your own reflections, your analysis, and your thoughts. And therefore, the second thing is the opposite would also then be true a good answer would not only rely on your own experiences, your own thoughts and your own feelings, but would also bring up some facts and theoretical concepts. So don't only do theory, don't only do your own reflection. You could also choose a particular theory or thought and develop it further if you like. Like within the limits of time and space that you have, you don't have to invent an entire new academic theory, but you could develop a thought a little bit further based on your own thoughts and feelings and experiences. That would also be a good answer. So I hope you now have got a good understanding of how to answer a question, what constitutes a good answer, what constitutes a little bit weaker answer. I'm next going to go still a little bit to talk about the use of sources, but as I've already said before, this is not the thing that you need to worry the most about. Do use it a little bit, and I'm going to give you a couple of tips next on how to do it. So I mentioned earlier that you should also use some sources and refer to some theories or concepts in your text. But how do you differentiate between your thoughts and what is part of a theory? You do this by marking your sources in your text. Before I talk about how to mark them in your text, I wanted to highlight a couple of considerations when choosing your sources. And remember, there's also guidelines about how to mark your sources in your text in the Learning Diary document on your course page. First of all, although you can choose your sources freely, you should choose sources that illustrate or emphasize your point. Support it rather than contradict it. You can of course bring out both sides of an argument if you want to do a more balanced thing, but then I think you should start your answer with saying that your intention is to analyze both sides of the argument, and preferably at the end present which one appeals to you more and why. If you only present the arguments that others have made, you run the risk that your essay or your learning diary becomes nothing more than a collection of ideas from different sources without anything interesting for the reader. That's me. So your opinion is what makes it interesting for me. So don't be afraid to bring it up. It's also a good practice to present your views at the beginning and at the end. And you could then in between provide some quotations from theories. So one option is beginning and end is your thoughts, and in between is the theory. Another option is that you start with presenting the key idea from a theory and then build upon that and present your own thoughts about it. The important thing with sources is that the reader is able to distinguish between the two. What are your views and what are the references to theories you learned in the class or other people's ideas? So that's really the essence of it. Being able to distinguish between your ideas and other people's ideas. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how to mark the sources in your learning diary. So let's do that next. So I gave you a couple of examples in a learning diary document on how to quote. So do go back to it and have a look at that. And like I also mentioned in the learning diary document, the referencing and the sources, this isn't going to be part that you need to worry most about. You will not fail your learning diary for marking quotes incorrectly. You would get a comment in your learning diary feedback that you didn't mark your references properly if you didn't use any, and that you should pay more attention to this going forward if it wasn't very clear. But it's fine to mark your sources in different ways. I have given you the Harvard sourcing and quotation as an example because that's the most widely used one in the academic environment. Now, how can you do that? It's fine to mark your sources after the sentence or paragraph where you're referring to a particular theory or a particular thinker. Where you have not marked a source, the assumption for the reader is that that is your own opinion. However, to make this clearer for the reader, after you have presented a theory, you could also explicitly say something in the lines of, I disagree with Friedman because, and then followed by the reasons for why you are disagreeing, perhaps because you don't think a company should only focus on profits and their shareholders, but because you think that they are part of society. Or you could say, I support Blowfield and Murray's views on corporate social responsibility myself because I find it easy to apply, it's easy to understand, or whatever your reason may be. And that really is it. I mean, there are a couple of examples in your learning diary document that give a more detailed view on referencing, plus provide also a sample of how to insert your reference list at the back of your document in an alphabetical order. A good practice is to add the author to the reference list as you progress with your writing, because that's how you ensure that you don't forget it. If you leave it as the last thing that you do in your writing, you might forget some of your sources. But that really is it. So look, referencing sourcing, nothing complicated about it. When unsure, ask or use your own gut feeling about what is right. All right, that's all from me then. Thank you for watching, and I am wishing you a great learning experience. Do ask me if you need help, give feedback if you think something can be improved, but otherwise, enjoy.